The keys to my cabin felt heavier than they should have when I stood in Patricia Morrison's real estate office in Whitefish, Montana. Outside the window, March wind pushed tumbleweeds across the parking lot while she stapled documents I'd already forgotten about. After 33 years running construction crews, I'd finally done it. Bought my piece of heaven for $155,000. Cash. No mortgage, no debt, just me and 800 square feet of timber surrounded by Glacier National Park wilderness. "Congratulations, Mr. Parker," Patricia smiled like she'd handed me the world. Maybe she had. "I'm Ted Parker, 58 years old, and I'd earned this retirement the hard way. Overtime shifts, packed lunches, vacations skipped to save every dollar. 40 years compressed into 6 figures, now converted into my dream, a place where I could hunt, fish, work with my hands, and finally hear myself think. Thank you." I pocketed the keys and shook her hand. My fingers were steadier than I'd expected. The drive from her office took me west on Highway 2, then north onto roads that grew narrower with each turn. Pavement became gravel, gravel became dirt. Cell service dropped from 4 bars to 2, then 1. I stopped at a general store and bought coffee, bread, eggs, butter. The clerk asked if I was visiting. "Living," I said. She nodded like I'd said something wise. The final 2 miles climbed through pine forest so thick the afternoon sun barely penetrated. When the cabin appeared in its clearing, I pulled over and cut the engine. 3 elk stood 50 yards beyond the porch, grazing like they owned the place. They raised their heads, studied my truck, then resumed eating. One flicked an ear at a fly. I sat there for 5 minutes watching them. No honking, no sirens, no voices bleeding through apartment walls. This was what I'd been saving for. The cabin was exactly as the photos promised. Weathered cedar logs, green metal roof, stone chimney, small, yes, but mine. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air smelled like pine sap and old wood smoke. 1 main room with a kitchenette, a bedroom barely large enough for a double bed, a bathroom with a shower stall I'd have to enter sideways. Perfect. I unloaded the truck slowly, methodically. Tools on the pegboard above the workbench, hammer, wrenches, handsaw, each in its designated spot. Books stacked on the shelf by subject. History, engineering manuals. 3 novels I'd been meaning to read for a decade. Coffee maker positioned on the counter where morning light would hit it first. Every item placed with intention, creating order from the chaos of moving boxes. By the time I finished, the sun was lowering. I made coffee too late in the day, but I didn't care, and carried it to the porch. The rocking chair I'd bought specifically for this moment creaked under my weight. The elk had moved deeper into the clearing. A hawk circled overhead, riding thermals. I called Kate. "Dad!" Her voice came through bright and immediate. "Are you there? Did you get it? Signed the papers this morning," I said. "I'm sitting on the porch right now watching elk. I'm so proud of you." The warmth in her tone made my chest tighten. "You earned this. 33 years of getting up at 5 a.m., dealing with contractors and deadlines." I sipped coffee. 33 years I dreamed about mornings where I'd drink coffee and watch wildlife instead of highway traffic. You deserve every moment of peace. She paused. "Nick has been so stressed with work lately. Sometimes I forget what peaceful even looks like." Something in the way she said it made me pause. "Everything okay?" "Oh, fine. You know how it is. Middle management pressures." She laughed, but it sounded thin. "When can I visit?" "Anytime, honey. You know that." We talked for another 10 minutes about her students, her garden plans, safe topics. When we hung up, I sat watching the sun paint the mountains orange and purple. The coffee had gone cold, but I drank it anyway. The phone rang an hour later. My parents lost their house. Nick didn't bother with hello. His voice had that flat tone he used for conference calls. "They're moving in with you for a couple months until they find something." My hand tightened on the armrest. "Wait, what?" "Nick, I just bought this place. It's barely big enough for a couple months until they find something. I'll text you their arrival time. I bought this place to be alone. I spent my entire retirement savings on, then you should have stayed in Helena if you wanted to live alone." Friday morning, the line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, staring at the clearing where the elk had been. They'd moved on. Smart animals. My knuckles had gone white on the armrest. I forced myself to release it, flex my fingers, breathe. Inside, I poured another coffee I didn't want and sat at the kitchen table. That's when I started planning. From my jacket pocket, I pulled a small notepad and a pen. The same kind of engineering pad I'd carried for 33 years, grid paper for sketches and calculations. I started writing, not emotional venting, but questions, timeline estimates, resource assessments. The cabin keys sat on the table beside my notepad. An hour ago, they'd meant freedom. Now they meant something else entirely. I picked them up, felt their weight, set them down with deliberate care. 33 years I'd been the reasonable one, the peacemaker, the man who swallowed inconvenience to keep family peace. Not anymore. Dawn came through the kitchen windows and found me still at the table. Empty coffee cups formed a semicircle around my notepad, which had grown dense with lists, diagrams, questions written and rewritten. I hadn't slept, didn't need to. My mind felt sharp in a way it hadn't for years, focused, crystalline, operating on something cleaner than rest. I made fresh coffee and studied my notes. Then I cleaned up, loaded my truck, and drove back to Whitefish. The Glacier National Park ranger station sat 20 minutes west, a modern building designed to blend with the landscape. Inside, educational displays showed wolf packs, bear territories, elk migration patterns. A ranger, maybe 40, with the weathered face of someone who spent more time outdoors than in, looked up from his desk. "Help you?" "Just moved up from Helena," I said. "Bought a place off County Road 27. Beautiful area. You'll want to be careful with food storage," he smiled. "Lots of bear activity come spring." "What about wolves?" "I've heard they're back in the region. Reintroduction's been successful." He stood and moved to a wall map, pointing to areas marked with colored pins. "They're usually shy, but they've got incredible sense of smell. Can detect prey or food from miles away." "You hunting?" "No, just curious. I want to be prepared." "Smart." He handed me a pamphlet. "Keep your property clean. Don't leave attractants out unless you want visitors." I took careful notes in my field notebook. Wind direction, pack territories, seasonal behavior patterns. I thanked him warmly, mentioned again that I was from Helena and still learning about mountain life. Every word calibrated to sound naive, concerned, exactly what he'd expect from a nervous newcomer. Back in Whitefish, I found Outdoor Supply Montana, the kind of place with taxidermy on the walls and racks of camouflage gear. The camera section sat between hunting equipment and security systems. "Looking for trail cameras," I told the clerk. "Want to monitor bear activity near my property." He showed me 2 models with motion activation, night vision, cellular connectivity. "These will do you right. We get lots of folks wanting to keep an eye on their land." $320. I paid cash. At the cabin Wednesday afternoon, I installed them methodically, one covering the driveway approach, one angled toward the front porch. I tested the motion sensors, checked signal strength, adjusted positions until the coverage was perfect. The engineering part of my brain, 33 years of solving structural problems, found satisfaction in the precision. Hide the cameras enough to be unobtrusive. Position them for optimal capture. Test, adjust, verify. Both cameras connected to my phone with 1 bar of cellular service. Weak, but functional. Thursday morning, I drove back to Whitefish. The butcher shop sat on a side street, the kind of place that served ranchers and local restaurants. "Need about 15 pounds of beef scraps," I said. "Organ meat, fat trimmings. Got a new property? Want to see what kind of wildlife I'm dealing with?" The butcher didn't blink. "You got it." $40 for meat wrapped in white paper, loaded into coolers I'd brought. The smell was immediate and powerful. Blood, fat, raw flesh. Thursday afternoon, I stood in the clearing behind my cabin with the coolers open. The wind came from the west. I checked it the old way, wetting my finger and holding it up. I walked 40 yards from the structure, upwind. Then I placed the meat in 3 piles, spreading it to maximize scent dispersion. Not random, calculated. Close enough to draw predators to the area, far enough that they'd focus on the piles, not the building. I wasn't trying to endanger anyone. I was trying to educate them. Back inside the cabin, I moved through each room, locked windows, turned off unnecessary power, set the thermostat to minimal heat, protecting my investment while setting my trap. I paused at the door, took one last look at the space I'd inhabited for less than a week, and left without hesitation. The drive to Helena took 5 hours. I arrived at my old house just before midnight, the suburban place I hadn't yet sold, still partially furnished, but hollow. I unloaded my truck, set up my laptop in the living room, propped my phone where I could watch the camera feeds. Then I waited. Friday morning at 10 a.m., a sedan appeared on my phone screen. Kenny and Dorothy emerged from their sedan, looking around with expressions I recognized even on the small display. Displeasure. Judgment. The camera microphone picked up their voices clearly. "This is where he's living now?" Dorothy wrinkled her nose. "It smells like pine and dirt." "At least it's free." Kenny walked toward the cabin. "We'll stay a few months. Let Nick figure out the next step." "I don't see why we had to come all the way out here." Dorothy stopped. Froze. Kenny. Wolves. 3 shapes emerged from the northwest tree line, gray and brown, moving with cautious purpose toward the meat piles. Not aggressive, not interested in humans, just hungry, doing exactly what wolves do when they smell an easy meal. Kenny saw them and went white. "Get in the car! Get in the car! Now!" They ran. Dorothy stumbled, recovered. Car doors slammed. The engine started and gravel sprayed as they reversed wildly, then accelerated down the driveway, probably doing 40 mph on a road meant for 15. The wolves, unbothered by the commotion, continued toward the meat. I closed the laptop and picked up my coffee. Took a slow sip. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. "What did you do?" Nick's voice had lost its business-like edge. Now it was just fury. "My parents nearly got attacked by wolves." "I didn't do anything," I said calmly. "I warned you this property is in wilderness. Wildlife lives here. This is their home. You set this up. You baited those animals. Nick, I live in wolf country. Wolves live here. Maybe you should have asked before assuming you could use my place as a hotel. You're insane. You're going to what? Sue me because wildlife exists on my property? Good luck with that. This isn't over." "No," I said. "It's just beginning." I pressed end call, set the phone down deliberately, returned to my laptop, and opened the footage again. Watched the wolves finish the meat and disappear back into the forest. Outside my Helena window, the mountains rose in the distance. Somewhere up there, my cabin waited. 2 weeks passed before Nick made his next move. I spent those days settling into the routine I'd imagined. Coffee on the porch at dawn, watching elk drift through the clearing, reading books I'd postponed for decades. But the peace felt conditional now, like standing on ice that might crack. I checked my phone more than I wanted to, kept the camera feeds open on my laptop, listened for vehicles on the dirt road. Mid-April brought warmer afternoons and the first serious wildflowers. I was splitting firewood when my phone rang. "Dad, please." Kate's voice broke on the second word. She was crying. Nick showed me the footage of the wolves. That could have been so much worse. I set down the axe and walked to the porch. "Kate, honey, wolves live in these mountains. I didn't create that situation. I warned Nick this wasn't appropriate housing for his parents. But you knew they were coming. You could have done something to make it safer. The script was obvious. Every phrase sounded rehearsed, coached. My daughter turned into his messenger. I bought this property for solitude," I said, keeping my voice level. "No one asked if I was willing to host guests. But I'm willing to meet with Kenny and Dorothy to discuss options." "You are?" Hope flooded her tone. "Really? I'll meet them in town. Neutral ground. We'll talk." After we hung up, I stood watching clouds move across the mountains. She genuinely believed she was helping. That made it worse. 2 days later, I drove to Whitefish for the meeting. I'd spent both evenings preparing, researching comparable rental prices for rural Montana properties, printing 3 copies of a standard short-term rental agreement, reviewing property law basics. I practiced my presentation in the truck mirror that morning, testing different phrasings until I found the right balance. Firm but not hostile, clear but not cold. The Grizzly Peak Cafe sat on Main Street, small and local, wooden tables, landscape photographs on the walls, large windows facing the morning foot traffic. I arrived 15 minutes early and chose my position carefully. Table near the window, back to the wall, clear view of the entrance, within range of the security camera I'd spotted above the register. I ordered black coffee and waited. Kenny and Dorothy arrived exactly on time. Nick must have driven them, probably parked nearby, coaching them on what to say. They walked in without ordering anything, sat down across from me like I'd summoned them to court. "Hello, Kenny." "Dorothy, would you like coffee?" Kenny ignored the question. Ted, this has gone on long enough. We need those keys today. We're not here for coffee, Dorothy added. We're here because family is supposed to help family. I pulled the rental agreement from my folder and slid it across the table. The paper made a soft sound against the wood. I agree, I said, which is why I've prepared a proposal. Kenny glanced down at the rental agreement, then back up, his face reddening. A rental agreement? You're charging us rent? Market rate for a furnished property in this area. $950 monthly, 6-month lease, standard terms. You want money from your own family? His voice climbed. Other patrons glanced over. From people who have nowhere to go? Dorothy leaned forward, her expression wounded. I never thought you were this kind of person, Ted. Greedy, just plain greedy. I stood, collected my folder, and picked up my coffee cup out of habit. Courtesy, the kind of gesture that separated me from people who expected to be served. Then I guess we don't have an agreement. You'll need to find alternative housing. You can't just... Kenny half rose from his chair. Where are we supposed to... That's not my problem to solve. Good afternoon. I nodded to the barista on my way out. In the truck, I sat for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel, breathing steadily, letting the adrenaline settle. Then I started the engine and drove home. That evening, my phone became a weapon aimed at me from multiple directions. First call came around 6 p.m. Cousin Linda, someone I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. Ted, it's Linda. I heard you've been having some difficulties. Difficulties? From whom? Nick called me. He's worried about you, said you're isolated in the mountains, acting strangely. The strategy revealed itself completely. He was building a narrative, planting seeds with every family member he could reach. Linda, I'm fine. I retired to Montana. That's not strange. That's a plan I've had for years. He said there was an incident with wild animals and you refused to help his parents. That's an interesting version of events. Thanks for checking on me, Linda. I'm doing well. I ended the call and stared at the phone. 20 minutes later, a former colleague from Denver. Same script, different voice. Nick had reached out, expressing concern about Ted's mental state. The third call came at 8:30 p.m. Kate again. You embarrassed them. Not crying now, angry. In public? What were you thinking? I offered them a fair solution. They rejected it. A rental agreement, Dad. Their family. Nick's parents. And this is my home, my retirement, my one place of peace, which I bought with money I saved for 33 years. Nick was right. You've changed. You've become someone I don't recognize. The words landed like she'd meant them to. I kept my voice quiet, controlled even as something cracked inside my chest. Maybe I have, or maybe everyone else has, and I'm just finally noticing. The line went dead. She'd hung up on me. I sat at the kitchen table with my phone in my hand, watching darkness settle over the mountains. 3 calls in one evening, all saying the same thing. Ted Parker is unstable, dangerous, unreasonable. The isolation I'd sought was being weaponized, turned into evidence of mental decline. Nick wasn't trying to take the cabin anymore. He was trying to destroy my credibility first, make me seem incompetent, turn the family against me so no one would believe my version of events. Classic strategy. Isolate the target, control the narrative, strike when they're defenseless. I opened my laptop and began typing. Mr. Anthony Richardson, attorney at law. I sent the email at 9:47 that night. Careful words, factual language, no emotion bleeding through. I needed legal advice regarding family pressure over property ownership, potential claims, asset protection. I included the basics, my age, property value, family situation, and 3 specific questions about elder law and estate planning. Then I poured myself bourbon. 1 glass, 2 fingers, no ice. I wasn't a heavy drinker, but tonight warranted it. The porch was cold for April, but I sat out there anyway, watching stars emerge over the mountains. Somewhere down there, Nick was planning his next move. I intended to be several steps ahead. Morning came with an email waiting. Anthony Richardson had responded at 7:15 a.m. He could meet Thursday afternoon at his office in Kalispell. Fee structure, $250 per hour. I confirmed the appointment immediately. For the next 3 days, I organized documentation. My engineering background served me well. Everything labeled, dated, cross-referenced, property deed in one folder, purchase documents in another, family tree diagram showing relationships, written timeline of events starting with Nick's first call, transcripts of key phone conversations from my detailed notes, printouts of the rental agreement Kenny had rejected. By Thursday morning, I had a leather portfolio case packed with evidence that could build a case as solid as any foundation I'd ever engineered. Wednesday evening, my phone rang. "Kate, Dad?" Her voice sounded thin, exhausted. "I'm sorry I yelled at you after the coffee shop thing. I'm exhausted." "I understand, honey. This has been hard on everyone. Nick is so stressed. He's been trying to help his parents ever since Kenny lost all that money." I went very still. "Lost money? What happened?" "Oh, you didn't know? Kenny was playing poker online, lost $32,000 over 6 months. That's why they lost the house. It was mortgaged for the gambling debts. $32,000. The number hung in the air like smoke. That's a substantial amount. No wonder Nick has been under pressure." "Yeah, and he keeps talking about solutions, about how if we could just, reorganize family assets." She was talking faster now, stress overriding caution. "He mentioned something about putting your cabin in a family trust so it could benefit everyone eventually, for your estate planning, And the property value is probably already up since you bought it in March." Every word was a piece clicking into place. A family trust, estate planning. "That's an interesting idea. When did Nick suggest this?" "A few weeks ago. He said it would be good for tax purposes when in the future. I don't really understand estate planning stuff. Neither do I. That's why I'm consulting an attorney this week, just to make sure everything's proper." "An attorney?" Her voice sharpened. "Dad, is that necessary? At my age, with property worth this much?" "Yes, it's the responsible thing to do." After we hung up, I added 6 pages of notes to my documentation. Kenny's gambling, Nick's scheme disguised as estate planning, the timeline of desperation driving aggression. Thursday afternoon, I drove to Kalispell and parked across from Murphy's Hardware on Main Street. Richardson's office occupied the 2nd floor of a well-maintained professional building. I watched for 5 minutes, assessing, then grabbed my portfolio and went inside. Anthony Richardson was maybe 50, Montana weathered, with the direct manner of someone who'd grown up on a ranch before law school changed his path. His office had wooden furniture, law books, framed degree from University of Montana, and a window overlooking the street. I presented my documentation in sequence: property papers, family diagram, timeline, evidence. Each document handed across at the appropriate moment. Richardson took notes, asked clarifying questions. I had answers prepared. "Mr. Parker, I have to say this is the most organized intake I've seen in years. You've documented everything. 33 years in construction engineering. Documentation prevents disputes. In this case, it's going to protect you significantly." He leaned back, tapping his pen against the desk. "Here's my assessment. Your son-in-law is attempting to establish grounds for claiming you're incompetent or need oversight. The smear campaign, the stories about dangerous behavior, these are preliminaries to a potential conservatorship claim. Conservatorship. Taking away my legal rights. It's a tactic, not always successful, but it can tie up your assets in court for months while they argue you can't manage your affairs. The solution is to prove conclusively that you are managing your affairs competently, which is what we're doing right now. What's the next step? Revocable living trust with an independent trustee. I'll be frank, it'll cost about $900 in legal fees, but it makes you essentially untouchable. The trust owns the property, not you personally. Family pressure becomes legally meaningless. Do it. How soon can we have it ready? 2 weeks. I'll draft the documents, you'll review and sign, we'll record it properly. After that, your property is protected. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. When I left, the sun was lower, but I felt clearer than I had in weeks. Following Richardson's advice, I drove to the public library instead of going home. I chose a corner computer terminal, backed to the wall out of habit, and accessed Colorado property records. Public databases I'd navigated before during my engineering career, building permits, property liens, easements. I entered Kate and Nick's address and downloaded their mortgage history. The home equity line of credit hit me like cold water. $25,000 dated 8 months ago. Single signature authorization, Nick's name only. I printed the documents with hands that didn't shake but wanted to, added them to my folder, drove back to the cabin in silence. That evening, I called Richardson from the porch. "Anthony, I found something. My daughter's house has a $25,000 HELOC that she didn't know about, taken out by her husband 8 months ago. Colorado property records. Colorado allows single-spouse HELOCs under certain conditions, but hiding it from a spouse? That's a different matter. Has she discovered it yet? No, I'm not sure when or if I should tell her." That's not a legal question, Ted. That's a family question. But from a legal perspective, this information explains his motivation. He's likely using your cabin scheme to cover existing debts. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and spread everything out. Attorney notes on the left, family communications in the center, financial discoveries on the right. Kenny's $32,000 gambling debt led to Nick's $25,000 HELOC to cover part of it, which led to financial pressure, which led to the scheme to acquire my cabin and eventually liquidate it for cash. Everything connected. I pulled out a legal pad and started drawing lines between related facts, circling key points, writing questions. Can Richardson investigate HELOC legality? Does Kate have legal recourse? When to inform Kate? How to protect her without alienating her further? My phone buzzed. Text from Richardson. "Trust documents ready Monday for review." I replied, "I'll be there." Then I made one final note at the bottom of my pad. Nick is cornered. Cornered animals attack. Prepare for escalation. 3 weeks later, on a Monday morning in early June, I drove to Richardson's office for the trust signing. The portfolio case beside me held 3 weeks of organized financial records, bank statements, retirement accounts, property appraisals, investment documentation. Everything consolidated, labeled, ready. Richardson's assistant had the documents waiting on the conference table. 43 pages total, each signature line flagged with a yellow tab. I read every page while Richardson answered emails at his desk, giving me time. The Revocable Living Trust designated him as independent trustee. Total assets, $290,000. The cabin, my retirement funds, everything I built in 33 years. The critical provision sat on page 17. Kate inherits only if divorced from Nick or if Nick signs a legal waiver of claims to the property. This provision here, Richardson said, joining me at the table, the conditional inheritance for Kate. You understand this might create family conflict? The conflict already exists. This just protects her from being exploited through my property. If Nick discovers this trust structure, he'll likely react aggressively. Let him. Everything here is legal. He has no grounds for challenge. Richardson's expression was knowing. Legal grounds and family drama are different things. Are you prepared for him to escalate? I've been preparing since March. That's why we're sitting here. He smiled slightly. Fair enough. Let's execute these documents. My signature was steady on every page. The notary, Richardson's assistant, applied her seal with practiced precision. The sound it made was satisfying. Structural integrity, legal addition. I wrote a check for $900 and left with copies of everything in a sealed envelope. The rest of that week I worked through my financial institutions methodically. Each phone call followed the same pattern. Identify myself, request beneficiary change forms, explain the trust structure, confirm documentation. Mr. Parker, I have your beneficiary change request, the retirement account administrator said. You're removing your daughter as beneficiary? No, I'm designating my revocable living trust as primary beneficiary. My daughter inherits through the trust. May I ask why you're making this change? Asset protection and estate planning. I have concerns about third-party claims. Understood. We'll process this within 5 business days. I'd like email confirmation as well, please. Of course. Is there anything else? Yes. Note in my file that this change was made voluntarily with legal counsel. I'm documenting my competency for all financial decisions. A pause. That's unusual, but I'll add that notation. By Friday, every asset I owned was protected within the trust structure. I kept a checklist on my kitchen table marking each completed task with satisfaction. Following Richardson's advice, I also scheduled a comprehensive medical evaluation with Dr. Helen Bradford in Whitefish. I wanted baseline documentation proving my physical and mental competency, insurance against any future claims. The medical building was modern, single-story, efficient. I filled out paperwork requesting copies of all test results and assessments. When Dr. Bradford called me back, I explained directly. I'm 58, own property, and want baseline medical documentation proving my physical and mental competency. She was a sharp woman in her 50s with the weathered competence of someone who'd practiced rural medicine for decades. Her expression showed understanding. I see. Unfortunately, I've encountered situations like this before. Adult children sometimes challenge parents' competency to gain control of assets. That's exactly what I'm preventing. Can you provide a detailed written assessment? Absolutely. I'll conduct comprehensive cognitive testing and provide a formal letter for legal purposes. The examination took 90 minutes. Blood pressure, reflexes, blood work, then cognitive testing. Mini mental state examination, clock drawing, memory recall exercises. She asked me to draw a clock showing 3:15. I drew it precisely. She asked me to remember 3 words, apple, table, penny, and recall them after 5 minutes. I remembered all 3. She asked me to count backward from 100 by 7s. I did so accurately. When finished, Dr. Bradford typed notes at her computer, then printed a letter on clinic letterhead. Mr. Theodore Parker is mentally competent, physically healthy, fully capable of managing his own affairs and making independent decisions regarding his property and finances. Patient is alert, oriented, cognitively intact. No signs of dementia, confusion, or diminished capacity. She signed it, applied the clinic stamp, handed me both the letter and copies of all test results. $230 for the extended evaluation. I paid by credit card, noting the transaction carefully for my records. 2 weeks later, Kate called. Dad, Nick has been so weird lately. Her voice sounded thin, exhausted. Asking about your finances, whether you've updated your will. I set down my coffee carefully. I have done some estate planning. It's responsible at my age. I know, but he got really angry when I mentioned you set up a trust. He called it a betrayal. Why would your estate planning betray him? It's not his inheritance. My hand tightened on the phone. Kate, did you tell him details about the trust? I just mentioned you set one up. I didn't think it was a secret. No, not a secret, just private. What exactly did Nick say? He said you're cutting the family out and being manipulated by lawyers. Dad, what's going on? Why does he care so much? That's a very good question, honey. One you should probably ask him directly. After hanging up, I immediately called Richardson. Nick knows about the trust. How soon can you get a medical evaluation? We already have Dr. Bradford's assessment. That was excellent foresight. His voice was confident. You're completely protected from competency challenges. The next day, I was repairing the porch railing when Nick's car came fast up the driveway, spraying dirt and gravel. He jumped out, didn't close the door properly, stormed toward me. I calmly set down my tools, retrieved my phone, started recording video. I stood at the top of the porch steps, 6 stairs up, giving me elevated position. Nick had to approach uphill, looking up at me. I held the phone at chest height, lens obviously pointed at him. Nick, you're on my property. Uninvited. I'm recording this conversation. I don't care about your recording. His face was red, movements aggressive. You set up some legal scheme to steal from your own daughter. The trust protects my assets and ensures Kate inherits appropriately. It's completely legal. Appropriately? What does that mean? Unless she divorces me. That's what you really want, isn't it? The trust ensures my property isn't subject to claims by third parties. That's standard estate planning. Third parties? I'm family. Your son-in-law. You're my daughter's husband. You have no legal claim to my property. The trust simply formalizes that reality. His voice climbed higher. We'll see about that. I'll get a lawyer. I'll contest this. I'll make sure you never see Kate again. You're threatening to isolate my daughter from me because I protected my own property. That's interesting. For the record, this isn't over. Then leave my property now or I'll call the sheriff for trespassing. He stormed back to his car. The engine roared. Gravel sprayed as he reversed wildly and sped down the driveway. I stopped. Recording. Reviewed the footage immediately. Faces visible, audio clear, threats documented. I uploaded it to cloud storage and emailed a copy to Richardson with subject line, Evidence, Hostile Confrontation. That evening, I wrote a detailed incident report. Date, time, what was said. No witnesses, unfortunately, but the video captured everything. Richardson's response came within an hour. Continue documenting everything. Consider additional security measures. Expect retaliation. They're running out of options. I spent the next morning upgrading my security. motion-activated floodlights around the cabin perimeter, additional trail cameras covering blind spots, door and window sensors connected to my phone. While testing the new equipment, I decided to check something that had been nagging at me. I drove down to the mailbox by the road and opened it with gloves on, not wanting my fingerprints on mail that wasn't mine. 3 envelopes, all addressed to Kenny Sullivan or Dorothy Sullivan at my cabin address. Montana Department of Family Services, First Mountain Credit Union, Social Security Administration. I photographed each envelope carefully with my phone, front, back, postmarks visible, dates clear. Then I placed them in a plastic evidence bag I'd brought specifically for this purpose. Back at the cabin, I called Richardson immediately. "Anthony, I found something significant. Kenny and Dorothy have been using my address for official correspondence. For what purpose? Benefits fraud, possibly. They're receiving mail from Montana Social Services and they've opened a bank account using my cabin address, but my camera footage proves they don't live here." That's a federal crime, isn't it? Mail fraud, benefits fraud, potentially identity theft if they claim to have your permission. We're talking years in federal prison if prosecuted. I looked at the evidence bag on my kitchen table. Then we report it. I'm not covering for criminals just because they're related to my son-in-law. Understood. I'll prepare the evidence package and contact the U.S. Attorney's Office. Ted, this changes everything. Once federal charges are filed, their credibility is destroyed. Good. Maybe they'll finally face consequences for their actions. The next week moved quickly. I compiled evidence with the same precision I'd brought to 33 years of engineering projects. Security camera footage showing Kenny and Dorothy's single brief visit in May. Utility bills proving no additional occupants. The mail records. My sworn statement that I never gave permission to use my address. Richardson forwarded everything to Assistant U.S. Attorney Lawrence Bennett in the Economic Crimes Division. Bennett called me 3 days later. "Mr. Parker, Attorney Richardson provided compelling evidence of benefits fraud using your property address. I never gave permission for them to use my address. I have camera footage proving they don't live here. I've reviewed the footage. It's clear they visited once, briefly and never returned. How long has mail been arriving in their names based on postmarks? At least 6 weeks. That establishes pattern combined with benefits applications claiming Montana residency. We have sufficient evidence for federal investigation. I'll be frank, this will likely result in criminal charges. I'm not trying to ruin their lives, but I won't allow my property to be used for fraud. You're doing the right thing by reporting this. We'll handle it from here." While Richardson investigated Kenny and Dorothy's fraud, he discovered something else in Colorado public records. Nick and Kate's home had 3 missed mortgage payments, $5,200 in arrears. Notice of default filed. First step toward foreclosure. "Ted, this explains his desperation," Richardson said when he called. "He was counting on your cabin to solve his financial crisis. When your trust blocked that plan, he had no backup." I sat at my kitchen table processing this. His own home is at risk. There's an unconventional option I need to mention. You could purchase the defaulted debt. Banks sell delinquent loans at discount to collection companies. You'd become the creditor, anonymously through an LLC. Nick would never know. The implications settled over me slowly. That would give me complete leverage. Yes, but it's also ethically complex. You'd control whether your daughter keeps her home. Let me think about it. I walked my property that evening, circling the cabin, following the tree line, considering. If I bought the debt, I'd control Nick's future. That was power I'd never wanted. But if the bank foreclosed, Kate would lose her home. She was innocent in all this. The next morning, I called Richardson. "Do it. Buy the debt. But Kate can't know yet, not until I can explain everything." The transaction took a week. $28,000 from my savings to an intermediary firm which purchased the debt and created Mountain Holdings LLC with me as beneficial owner. Nick received notification that his loan had been sold, but no information about the new creditor. By mid-August, my position had transformed completely. Kenny and Dorothy faced federal investigation. Nick's mortgage debt was secretly under my control. Every manipulation attempt was documented. My own property and assets were legally untouchable. But I felt no triumph. Just weariness. This was supposed to be peaceful retirement. Instead, it had become warfare where my opponents forced me to fight back. I sat on my porch at sunset, the evidence folders stacked beside me, and made my decision. Kate deserved to know the truth, all of it. She deserved to understand what her husband had done, what danger her home was in, what her father had been protecting her from. I pulled out my phone and typed, "Honey, we need to talk. Can you come to the cabin this weekend? Just you. It's important." Her response came 10 minutes later. Is everything okay? You're worrying me. Everything's fine with me, but there are things you need to know about your financial situation. Things Nick hasn't told you. What things? Dad, you're scaring me. Not over text. In person. Saturday afternoon, I'll make lunch. Nick has a work trip this weekend. I can come Saturday. Perfect. Just you. This conversation is between us. Okay, I'll be there around noon. I set down the phone and looked at the mountains darkening against the sunset. Tomorrow I'd prepare. Saturday I'd tell my daughter how badly her husband had betrayed her trust. The truth wouldn't be easy. She might not believe me initially. She might be angry. But I'd kept these secrets long enough. Saturday morning arrived with crystalline clarity. I woke early, nervous in a way I hadn't been throughout this entire conflict. Facing Nick required strategy. Facing my daughter required something harder, honesty that would hurt her. I cleaned the cabin, already clean, but I needed activity. Prepared chicken salad for sandwiches, her childhood favorite. Organized the evidence folders on the kitchen table where she'd sit. Her sedan appeared around 11:30, dust trailing behind on the driveway. She emerged looking tired, worried. I met her on the porch and hugged her. She was tense. We started with coffee and small talk, her teaching job, the weather, anything but the real conversation. But the folder on the table kept drawing her eyes. Finally, Dad, what's going on? Your text scared me. I took a breath. Honey, there are things about your financial situation that Nick hasn't told you. Serious things. She laughed nervously. What? Did he forget to pay a credit card bill? He sometimes gets distracted. Your house is in foreclosure. 3 months of missed mortgage payments. The bank was about to take your home. Her face went white. That's not possible. We pay the mortgage. Nick handles it online every month. That's what he told you. Here's what actually happened. I slid the notice of default across the table. She read it slowly, hands beginning to shake. This says the loan was sold to Mountain Holdings, LLC. Who is that? That's me. Well, technically a company I own through my attorney. I bought your debt from the bank. You bought our mortgage? Shock transformed her expression. Why would you do that? How can you even... What does that mean? It means instead of the bank foreclosing and you losing your home, I control the debt. You and Nick owe me now, not the bank. She stood abruptly, emotions rising. This is insane. Why didn't you just tell me the mortgage was behind? Would you have believed me, or would Nick have explained it away? I needed leverage to protect you from what's coming next. I let that settle, then continued. There's more. 8 months ago, Nick took out a home equity line of credit for $25,000 against your house. Here are the documents. That's not true. We'd both have to sign for that. I slid the HELOC papers across. In Colorado, under certain circumstances, one spouse can secure a HELOC. Here's his signature. Where's yours? She examined the papers. Hands, shaking badly now. I never signed this. I've never even seen this paperwork. $25,000. Where did it go? Best guess? Covering some of Kenny's gambling debts. Remember you told me Kenny lost $32,000 in online poker? Nick was trying to fix his father's problem using our house as collateral without telling me. Yes. And when that wasn't enough, when the cabin scheme failed and he couldn't get more money, he simply stopped paying your mortgage. I suggested we eat. She initially refused. How can you think about food right now? But I insisted gently. We needed a break before the next revelations. The sandwiches tasted like dust, but we ate anyway. Afterward, I showed her the rest systematically, chronologically. The recording of Nick's threatening confrontation on my porch. The APS false complaint where he tried to have me declared incompetent. Kenny and Dorothy's federal mail fraud using my address. Each piece of evidence carefully presented with dates and context. She listened, initially defensive. Nick wouldn't do that. Then doubtful. Are you sure these documents are real? Finally, as the evidence became overwhelming, devastated. When I showed her the APS complaint, where her husband tried to have her father's legal rights taken away, she broke. Not gentle tears, wrenching sobs that shook her shoulders. I let her cry, didn't offer platitudes, just sat present. When she could speak, it was through tears. How long have you known? Pieces since May. Everything since July. She looked at me with hurt and anger. Months? You've known for months that my marriage is a lie, that I'm in financial danger, and you didn't tell me? I met her eyes. If I had told you in May with no proof, would you have believed me? Or would Nick have convinced you I was paranoid, vindictive, exactly what he was already saying? Her voice dropped quieter, knowing I was right. I don't know. Probably not. That's why I waited. That's why I gathered evidence. So you'd know the truth was real, not just your father's opinion. I refilled her coffee, pushed the sugar bowl toward her. She liked it very sweet when stressed, a detail from childhood. Eventually, I had to present the choice. You have a decision to make, and you need to make it soon. What decision? Stay with Nick or leave him. I won't make that choice for you. How can I possibly decide that right now? You have until the end of August. That's about a week. Why? What happens then? Because federal agents are going to arrest Kenny and Dorothy within 2 weeks for fraud. When that happens, everything becomes public. Nick will be questioned. Your marriage will be news in a town small enough that everyone knows everyone. She was overwhelmed. This is too much. I can't think. If you leave Nick, file for divorce, protect yourself legally, I'll forgive the mortgage debt on your house. You'll own it free and clear. I will help you rebuild. You're bribing me to leave my husband. I'm offering you a lifeline, whether you take it as your choice, but understand, if you stay with him, I can't protect you from what's coming. Hours later, she gathered her things, exhausted. I walked her to her car, carrying a folder of document copies. Before getting in, she turned. Did you ever think about what this would do to me? Knowing all this, every single day since I found out. That's why I built such a strong case, so you'd know I wasn't exaggerating. I don't know if I can forgive you for waiting so long. I understand, but I'd rather have you angry at me for waiting than destroyed because you didn't know in time to protect yourself. I need time to think. You have a week. After that, everything moves forward, with you or without you. She looked at me with exhausted eyes. I don't know who to trust anymore. Trust the documents. They don't lie. People do. She drove away without looking back. I stood in the driveway watching until her car disappeared, wondering if I'd just lost my daughter or saved her. 5 days later, Wednesday morning, I was drinking coffee on the porch when my phone rang. Richardson. Ted, it's happening now. Federal agents are executing arrest warrants for Kenny and Dorothy in Colorado. Thought you should know. I set down my coffee carefully. Not celebrating, just acknowledging. Thank you for telling me. An hour passed, then my phone rang again. Kate, her voice shaken. Dad, Nick just got a call. His parents were arrested by federal agents. Something about fraud. Were you involved in this? I took a breath. I reported crimes to the proper authorities. What happened after that was the justice system doing its job. Long silence. Then quietly, I need to call you back. The line went dead. I sat back down, staring at the mountains, wondering if my daughter would ever forgive me for setting this chain of events in motion. Within 3 hours, Nick called, screaming, "You did this! You turned them in! You destroyed my family!" I remained silent, letting him exhaust himself. Your parents committed federal crimes using my property. I reported it. That's what law-abiding citizens do. I'll tell everyone. I'll make sure they know you orchestrated this, that you're vindictive and cruel. Go ahead. I have documentation of every crime they committed. My attorney will be happy to share it publicly. Richardson had driven to my cabin specifically for this moment. I handed him the phone. Mr. Sullivan, this is Anthony Richardson, legal counsel for Ted Parker. His voice was professional, measured, final. Your parents committed federal crimes. My client fulfilled his civic duty by reporting those crimes to authorities. Any attempt to defame him will result in immediate legal action. Do you understand? Click. Nick had hung up. Friday afternoon, Nick attempted to sell the house he shared with Kate, desperately needing cash for his parents' legal defense, for his own survival. But the title search revealed the problem. The mortgage was in default and owned by Mountain Holdings, LLC. His realtor explained he couldn't sell without the lien holder's approval. Nick called Richardson in a panic. Your firm owns my mortgage. How is that possible? My client purchased your defaulted debt through legal channels. You were notified weeks ago that your loan was sold. I need to sell this house. My parents need lawyers. Please. Richardson's response was calm. My client is willing to discuss terms. You'll receive a formal offer within 24 hours. Saturday morning, a courier delivered a certified letter. Inside was a formal offer from me through Richardson's firm. Terms: I would forgive the entire mortgage debt, $33,200 remaining balance plus $5,200 in arrears. Total debt forgiveness of $38,400. Conditions: Nick must sign divorce papers with no asset claims. He must sign a legal waiver relinquishing any claims to my property, estate, or assets. He must sign a sworn statement acknowledging he had no legal right to use my cabin or involve me in his financial problems. Deadline: 72 hours. If he refused, I would foreclose immediately. He'd lose the house anyway with nothing gained. Nick called Kate, tried to convince her to fight this with him. Her response, which I learned later, was simple. I already filed for divorce yesterday. Sign the papers, Nick. It's over. Meanwhile, that same Saturday, Kate drove to my cabin. She looked different, still processing everything, but stronger somehow. Dad, I've been thinking about everything you showed me. She sat across from me at the kitchen table where we'd had that devastating conversation a week earlier. I kept going back to the documents, like you said. They don't lie. I waited, letting her speak. I found more things when I looked through our files at home. Bank statements Nick had been hiding, credit card bills I'd never seen. The financial lies go back 2 years, not just 8 months. My chest tightened. I'm sorry, honey. No, don't apologize. You were right to wait until you had proof. If you'd come to me in May with suspicions, I would have defended him. I would have believed his explanations. She pulled out a folder of her own. I filed for divorce Friday morning. I also found a lawyer who specializes in financial fraud in marriage. She says I have grounds to recover everything Nick took. That's when I knew she was going to be all right. The house? I want to keep it, if that's still part of your offer. It's the first place that ever felt like home to me. But I'll pay you back every dollar. I'm not taking charity. Kate, it's not charity. It's protecting family. Then let me earn it. Give me a fair payment plan. Treat me like the responsible adult I should have been all along. I smiled. First genuine smile I'd had in months. We'll work something out. Monday morning, Nick appeared at Richardson's office. Richardson described him later, disheveled, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, hands shaking. He signed every document: divorce agreement, property waiver, sworn statement. When it was done, he asked quietly, "Can I at least keep the house?" Richardson's response was matter-of-fact. "Once the divorce is final, the house will be deeded to Kate, free and clear. You'll need to find other accommodation." Nick left without another word. That same afternoon, my phone rang. Kate again. "Dad, I signed the final papers. I'm officially divorced, and I wanted to thank you." For what? For not giving up on me when I couldn't see what was right in front of me. For being patient when I was angry at you for telling me the truth. For fighting for me even when I didn't want to be fought for. You don't need to thank me for being your father. Yes, I do. Because not every father would have done what you did. Most would have either stayed out of it completely or handled it with a lot more anger and a lot less strategy. I'm proud of you for making the hard choice. That takes real strength. Her voice broke slightly. I'm scared, Dad. Starting over at my age, learning to trust my own judgment again. You're going to be fine. Better than fine. You're going to be free. Can I ask you something? Anything. When you bought that cabin, did you ever imagine it would lead to all this? I looked out at the mountains thinking. No. I thought I was buying peace and quiet. Turns out I was buying the tools to save my daughter. I love you, Dad. I love you too, honey. More than you know. 2 weeks later, I sat in a federal courtroom in Billings, Montana, attending Kenny and Dorothy's sentencing hearing. I didn't have to be there. The prosecutor didn't require my presence, but I needed to see this through to the end. Kenny and Dorothy stood before the judge, looking diminished in their federal court attire. Their attorney had negotiated a plea deal, guilty pleas to reduce charges in exchange for lighter sentences. The judge reviewed their criminal history, none, and their ages, then the evidence of their guilt, which was overwhelming. Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan, you've pleaded guilty to benefits fraud. The court accepts your plea agreement. The judge's voice was firm. I want to be clear about the severity of your actions. You exploited systems designed to help citizens in genuine need. Yes, Your Honor, Kenny said quietly. 2 years supervised probation, $38,000 in restitution and fines, permanent ban from federal and Montana state benefit programs. You'll report monthly. Any violation results in immediate imprisonment. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, they said in unison. You're fortunate to avoid prison. Don't squander this opportunity. Dismissed. As I left the courthouse, Kenny caught my eye across the lobby, a moment of mutual recognition. He looked away first, defeated. I felt no triumph, only closure. Kate told me later that Nick moved to a small efficiency apartment in a cheaper area of Denver. He took minimal belongings, whatever fit in his car. I saw him one final time when he came for his things, she said. He looked like a stranger. Not angry, just empty. He signed the final divorce papers without a word and left. The divorce was finalized by mid-September. Kate legally resumed her maiden name, Kate Parker. With my help, she found a small 2-bedroom house in Whitefish, about 15 minutes from my cabin. It was modest but charming. Older construction that needed updates but had good bones and a view of the Absaroka Mountains. I provided the down payment as a gift. Kate secured a mortgage for the remainder using her teaching income and her excellent credit. She also landed a 3rd-grade position at Whitefish Elementary, starting immediately. I helped her move in, spending a weekend painting rooms and assembling furniture. Simple work, but profoundly meaningful, rebuilding our relationship through practical acts of service. Healing wasn't linear for Kate. Some days she was optimistic about her fresh start. Other days she was angry. At Nick, at herself, even at me for not telling her earlier. I listened without defending myself, understanding she needed to process complex grief. We fell into a routine, Sunday dinners together, alternating between her place and mine. During one dinner, while we chopped vegetables together in her new kitchen, she asked, "Do you think I'll ever trust anyone again? Ever want to remarry?" I set down my knife. Honestly, I don't know, but that's okay. Trust isn't something you're supposed to give freely to everyone. It's earned slowly through consistent actions over time. Anyone worth having in your life will understand that. She smiled, small but genuine. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just old enough to have made mistakes and learned from them. On a crisp, late September evening, Kate drove to my cabin for dinner. We cooked together, nothing fancy, just spaghetti and salad, and ate on the porch despite the cooling weather. As the sun set, painting the mountains in orange and gold, a small herd of elk emerged from the tree line to graze in my clearing. We sat in matching rocking chairs. I'd bought a second one after she moved nearby, and watched in comfortable silence. Then Kate said quietly, "Thank you, Dad, for everything, for fighting for me, even when I didn't understand it, for being patient while I figured things out." Emotion tightened my throat. "You don't need to thank me. You're my daughter. I'll always fight for you. I know, but I want to. You could have walked away, protected just yourself. You didn't. That was never an option. Family means we protect each other, even when it's hard. I'm sorry I didn't believe you sooner. Don't apologize for being loyal to your marriage. That speaks well of you." She smiled genuinely for the first time in months. "Look at that big bull elk. He's magnificent. That's my favorite. I see him almost every evening. I already love it here. This feels like home. It is home. For both of us now." Later, after Kate drove away, I remained on the porch, rocking slowly, watching the last light fade from the sky. I thought back to March, buying this cabin filled with hope for peaceful retirement, then having that peace threatened by Nick's ultimatum. The journey from March to September felt like years, but I'd navigated it without losing myself, without becoming cruel, without abandoning my values. I'd protected what mattered using law and strategy instead of retaliation and anger. My daughter was safe, building a new life nearby. My property was secure, my autonomy intact. The antagonists faced appropriate consequences but weren't destroyed beyond recovery. They could rebuild if they chose better paths. As stars appeared above the mountains, I allowed myself a small smile. This is what I'd wanted all along. Quiet evenings, wildlife, mountain air, and now my daughter close enough to share it with. Not the retirement I'd planned, but better, because it was earned through integrity rather than luck. I stood, stretched my back, I wasn't young after all, and walked inside to call Kate just to say goodnight, just because I could, just because she was there, and we were okay. The cabin door closed softly. The mountains stood silent, witnesses to peace hard won and deeply appreciated. My workshop was organized, my properties secure, and Kate was safe. Sometimes, that's what winning looks like. The end.